This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.
Good evening. My name is Joe Sam Robinson. It's our pleasure to have with us tonight Dr. Buck Melton. Welcome, Buck. You've been here a lot, and we've talked about a lot of different subjects. So tonight, maybe we can talk about the recent report that's been released by the U.S. Senate in regards to what's perceived as excesses of the CIA, and we might call that torture. At least that's the word that's been batted about a lot. And this sort of gets into a lot of issues, among them checks and balances and the structure we have of our government, and maybe you could opine on some of these issues as to where we stand with this.
Yes, well, I'll give it a try. Obviously, the CIA is an independent executive agency, slightly less independent now than before with the new Director of National Intelligence. Technically the creature of Congress, technically overseen by Congress, but Congress has a lot on its plate, has a lot of things to supervise, has a lot of legislation to pass. And that means that this agency, in a lot of ways, can become a power unto itself. And a lot of the decisions that get made within the agency. And I think some of those decisions are coming back to bite it with the release of this report. So that's, when you talk about responsibility and oversight, there's not a whole lot, unfortunately, and that can lead to policies that the American people might have serious problems with.
Now, isn't this a big problem in general about the Congress has whatever 535 members, I guess. Maybe it's one or two more if the District of Columbia is counted. But they have this number of people out there. They have relatively little number of people on their staffs. And there's a huge, extraordinary federal bureaucracy out there.
Millions of people.
So is this, and allegedly, the Congress is in the position of supervising or having some measure of control over these bureaucratic organisms. But they're really under the domain of the executive, are they not? And in general, isn't that the way the bureaucratic structure works? The Congress is sort of out here, and all of the U.S. government is being channeled up through executive circles. Yes. Right to the president.
Yes.
So in these circumstances, with any agency that you could say is off base, if you want to say that, isn't that the normal purview of the executive to make some kind of comments that control that?
Yes, and that's really the function of executive orders, which is also, executive orders have been in the news a lot lately, because executive orders are directives from the president to his employees, i.e. the millions of executive branch workers, as to how to do their jobs. So yes, theoretically Congress could pass a law tomorrow abolishing the CIA. In practice, of course, that's not going to happen. It gets entrenched. It does a job that at its base level is a very important job. So who's got the whip hand here? Who really is in charge? Is it Congress or is the CIA? Or is the president? At what point does the president have to take some sort of responsibility for what his employees are doing?
Well, isn't there, I mean, the thing that seems to me is one of the issues that's a little different, and this is compared with another bureaucratic structure, I don't know, the Forestry Commission, or I don't know, airport, running the airports, whatever, some other agency. The things they do are pretty much in public purview, but the CIA is deliberately kept, the people don't know, I don't believe they know what the CIA budget is. I don't think that's public knowledge.
Correct.
I don't think they know anything about the structure. So everything is totally in the dark. I mean, no one knows what's happening. Newspapers can't penetrate what they're up to. And since the Patriot Act has been passed, allegedly, they have a tremendous amount of increased power, and they're doing all sorts of things that we're I would say it's fair to say we're unaware of these things, and that we depend on Congress to be the watchdogs. In other words, some kind of checks and balances about the sort of power this agency has. And it appears to me it's the oversight is questionable at best if we only have 4 people in Congress that have any access to what the CIA is up to. Yes. And they have a very limited staff, yes, and they have a very limited amount of time to watch things. How can Congress possibly be an effective watchdog for this huge organization? Mm-hmm. And is that one of the things that would assuage concerns if people thought that Congress is truly watching the situation?
Well, let's expand on that a little bit. The problems are, as you say, that Congress has an extremely heavy workload. They have a million other things on their plates. There are not many people in Congress who are tasked with oversight. Then you have to ask, how much practical knowledge do they have of the intelligence community? Some of them may have an intelligence background in theory. Some of them will presumably gain some of that experience, some intelligence experience, if they are there long enough doing this oversight. But it's once again a question of who's going to know more, your congressman or the people in the CIA. So the people in Congress, even if they have the resources, may not have the experience and background necessary. And then you haven't even mentioned another problem, which is the one of greatest concern. Theoretically, the CIA reports to Congress, but what happens if there is an internal decision made within the CIA that we would compromise national security by sharing this information with our overseers? And to put it bluntly, what if the CIA is not telling?
Or, I mean, if the CIA is being funded by Congress, yes, if the CIA believes, well, this could interfere with our funding if we, we've sort of screwed up here, yes, and we don't want to be too, we want to be a little circumspect about confessing error, so we'll just table this, and that won't interfere with our funding. And everybody makes mistakes, and we know what these politicians are like. They'd like to take our money away. Our mission is a holy mission to protect the country. So we have an obligation to the American people not to tell Congress. That's the way they might think.
It's not patriotism.
Not to tell them about these issues, because yes, we understand the dangers America faces more than anyone, and we don't want another 9/11. Ergo, we can take whatever steps we'd like to do something about this.
Patriotism being the last refuge, etc. And that's a scary thing, yes. That it is for the greater good that I disobey the law, or that at least I bend the law in this situation. And once you've got a covert intelligence agency making those decisions, that's a very scary proposition.
Now, I'm trying to push a little bit is on oversight of the CIA. And my understanding is that there are committees in the House and in the Senate that have some kind of overseeing responsibilities. But not everybody in those committees have access to everything, nor do their staff. And I think they try and keep the head of each committee and the ranking member in each committee really in the loop. That's not many people. No. I'm a little concerned about the level of oversight. But what about the judicial branch? Maybe you could talk about that. There's some judicial restraint involved in overseeing the CIA, isn't that right?
Generally speaking, but the courts give a lot of latitude to the bureaucracy, as long as there is something that appears to be due process in place in an administrative agency's internal workings. Then the courts are not going to be very heavily involved. And of course, the courts can't go hunting. The courts can't, a judge can't get up one morning and say, I wonder what that CIA is up to. Let me just throw a bunch of subpoenas at them and see. Yes. What somebody's actually got to bring a case before the court. And if you've got a Taliban suspect who's being held in a base that's not even in the continental United States, and he has no access to counsel, he's not a United States citizen, how is he going to get anything before the court?
Is that why many of these, I guess, CIA, I'm going to pick my word carefully, I guess extraction apparatuses, where they're going to try and extract information from captured prisoners, they're not located in the actual United States. They're somewhere else. if firstly, I think the CIA is not authorized to function in the United States. But were they, if they captured someone, an Al Qaeda person, and they brought them into, I don't know, pick your place, Central Georgia, and they were waterboarding those people, could a local attorney try and attempt to represent them? Could the court stop that? Doesn't the Constitution talk about cruel and unusual punishment?
Yes, and I was actually thinking a little bit about that before the show. I'm wondering if cruel and unusual punishment would apply if you don't have a judicially sanctioned punishment for the commission of a crime. It may not even come into play. I think the bigger issue, if I were litigating,
I'm laughing a little bit.
Yeah.
But keep going.
Yeah, it's interesting. No, I'd see it more as a tort or an injury. If I were an attorney in that situation, I would argue the equal protection clause as well as due process clauses. And the equal protection clause applies originally to states, and it says, "Nor shall any state deprive to any person within its jurisdiction," which would seem to be a territorial jurisdiction, the equal protection of the laws. So that means if the police couldn't stop you and beat you up gratuitously for jaywalking, then theoretically they couldn't do it to a terrorist. And that's been reverse incorporated, which means the federal government is also bound by equal protection. So keeping them off of United States territory, if I'm now the interrogator, my first line of defense, my first claim to say what I'm doing is okay, waterboarding or whatever, is making sure it doesn't happen on United States sovereign territory. So.
Well, if that were to happen, I mean, let's pursue that. I mean, I like the language, no cruel and unusual punishment in the Constitution. I like having it there.
Yes.
But your viewpoint is that's a pretty the way it's put in there. It's quite restricted. Does that mean that people could be if someone said, "Well, I'm going to read your Miranda rights," I read that. Of course, respond to that. Now I'm going to waterboard you.
Yes.
And and you've read the Miranda rights. We're going to be. Wouldn't that be, to me, that would appear to be cruel and unusual to waterboard some person? Yes. I mean, what protects an American citizen against excessive efforts to extract confessions?
Well, there are several criminal procedural rights, but you don't really think of cruel and unusual punishment being one of those. Cruel and unusual punishment is usually seen as a post-conviction remedy. That, okay, you've been found guilty of something, you've been tried by a jury of your peers, yes. And now we're going to pull out your fingers.
Now we're going to waterboard you.
Yes. But the most basic one is the right to remain silent, the Fifth Amendment, as well as the presumption of innocence.
Well, you have all those things. Why you have the right. We're going to waterboard you. Yes. You don't have to say anything. Yes. But I mean, is that adequate protection? I mean, against. I want to know what kind of restraints American citizens have that prevent the government from. Suppose you're an American citizen, yes. and many people that that follow Al Qaeda are American citizens. They've gone to the Middle East, they fight, and maybe they know something about trying to another 9/11. They happen to be on U.S. territory.
Yes.
My question is, what prevents those people from being waterboarded? Is there some kind of? Are they protected by the Constitution?
It's a complicated question, and there's the legal and the actual. Legally, yeah, the courts have come down very squarely. There are at least two cases that occur to me. One goes back to the 1940s, Chambers versus Florida, which I believe dates to the 40s. And that even includes police intimidation as torture. So even if I know, I'm the interrogator, you're the suspect, just in a criminal case, and I suspect that you've done something bad, and I know I'm not going to lay a hand on you, but you don't know that. And I walk around with a rubber hose or a baseball bat. The court said that atmosphere of intimidation amounts to torture and coerces you to give up your right to remain silent. Roshin versus California, which happened in the 60s. There's a police raid on a drug establishment. The druggie immediately pops the pills to keep the police from confiscating him. The police drag him down to the hospital and forcibly pump his stomach. The Supreme Court said that's a no-no. That is police activity which shocks the conscience.
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, let's suppose, hypothetically, we have, and many people, American citizens, are they're fighting for Al Qaeda. They're on U.S. soil, and there could be some people that would say, "I want to do the nation harm."
Yes.
And if the law enforcement people found out about that,
Yes.
could the precedent that's been established by the people overseas, we're just going to send you to Romania and we're going to waterboard you there. We've got you here. It's going to be hard to get you to Romania. We'll just take you down and start waterboarding you. We believe that you have some important information, and you're this person's attorney. How could you stop that process? What rights does the person have?
So you're saying they're here in the U.S.
They're in the U.S. and people suspect that they're connected with a terrorist organization.
Yes.
They refuse to say anything.
So let's get them to a base somewhere away from here.
And they're on the U.S. soil.
Yes. If I know that's going on, I think the immediate thing I'm going to do is try to get a habeas corpus petition. So that means that the agents are going to have to show in court why they are holding this person. What are the legal grounds? And that, at the very least, should slow down any sort of transfer. Once again, if they get you away, and if I'm your attorney of record at that point, even if they've gotten you away, if you're in Romania or something, I can still probably go to a court within the continental United States saying, "Hey, this guy's my client. He was here. Let's pursue this."
Now, does that mean produce the body? Are they supposed to bring the person into the court, or is it just we've got him somewhere in Transylvania right now?
It literally means produce the body, but what it actually means is you have to give the court the legal reason for his incarceration, and if the court finds any sort of defect in that legal reason, then he's got to be let loose.
Well, I'm still pushing on this a little bit. Okay, there's a legal reason. Of course he's in custody. The guy we believe he plans to blow up the state. I don't know, the national capital. He's going to blow Washington D.C. up. There's an atomic bomb floating around here, and he's an American citizen. He's connected with this. So the courts wouldn't they say, "Sure, we're not going to." It's reasonable for you to keep him in custody. We're denying bail.
Yes.
You're in custody. You're denying bail, and then he's being aggressively waterboarded.
Yes.
And what's the deal? What happens, and how is that citizen protected?
Well, there are a couple of things here, and that's why I said the legally and actually. That legally, it is almost impossible for you to drive more than 70 miles an hour in this country. People, in actuality, do it every day.
Yes.
So legally, you have protections, but actually, if the CIA has got you someplace, then they can do what they want to you, actually.
As an American citizen in the country.
That is why we have a Bill of Rights, because actually...
Well, how does that protect us?
It doesn't. It can only give you a remedy. If a policeman... Let's take a more mundane example. You're driving home tonight, a policeman sees you go over the line a little bit, he thinks maybe you've been drinking, he stops. You don't like policemen for whatever reason, you give the policeman some lip.
Right.
That policeman can abuse his authority. He can get you out of the car, he can say that he smelled alcohol and conduct an illegal search.
Right.
And the last thing you want to do, even if you know that policeman is violating the law and violating your rights, the last thing you want to do is try to physically prevent that policeman from stopping you. All you can do in that situation is preserve your rights for presentation at trial. So if the CIA wants to waterboard you badly enough, it's going to waterboard you. The only hope you have got is somehow, and this is a big question mark, can you get your case into an open federal court and introduce evidence to the fact that your confession was coerced in violation of your constitutional rights, if any?
Well, now I'm a little alarmed at all this.
Yes.
So, as I understand this, then I'm going to tread carefully on this. There must be some restraint for American citizens when they're in police custody. There must be some kind of protection. Can't they sue for, police brutality?
Yes.
So what happens? Can the conviction be thrown out? Can a person face criminal charges?
Yes,
in other words,
all of those.
So I know what happened, and is it possible to assault an American citizen they're trying to extract a confession?
Yes.
And do the courts say what assault? Is it touching a person? I mean, is that assault?
Well, once again, a climate, going back to the Chambers case, even a climate of intimidation. Now, police can play mind tricks on you. One of the best things I ever saw was a presentation by a third-year law student who had, before going to law school, he had been a police detective.
Yes.
And he was doing an exercise with his fellow law students showing you how he could, as a detective, essentially get you to say anything you wanted. And he was making this point to show that you should never talk to the police without counsel, even if you know you didn't do anything. Because if the police are talking to you, they have a suspicion, well-founded or not. They suspect you've done something. And there are many things. Talk to me now before the lawyer gets here,
yes.
and we can handle this thing easily. We can make this thing go
Sure.
away. If you bring the lawyers in, we're going to have to ramp. Yeah. So there are a million different approaches they can take. So the question is, can you show some sort of intimidation, some sort of situation?
Well, could you say you're an American citizen? There's an atomic bomb. They think you've sequestered somewhere in Washington. The CIA is about to what? Could you say, I demand to have my lawyer here? I mean, what happens? I mean, they say forget it. I mean, so they violate all these things. And who are you? Forget my name, or we're going to beat you unconscious. We're going to put you in coma so you could never say what happened. Now, these are extreme things I'm saying, but it is germane. If things like this have happened overseas, that's a whole other story about justifications for this. But the protection American
yes.
citizens have when they're in police custody from anybody, can they be enumerated? It sounds like the police could or the CIA could do a lot of things to you.
Well, they can, and I think what you're getting at, and I don't know if you know you're getting at this or not,
well,
but what is the ultimate restraint is the fundamental human sense of decency. That and we see this from one of the CIA operatives who was very critical, who stopped the torturing and said it's not humane, it's not decent, and it doesn't produce good results on top of that.
Which of course is we haven't even gotten into that. Yes. We haven't gotten into even a bigger conversation about this as to what actually can be extracted from this mechanism. And one of the things that upsets me about it, besides all the moral issues, but just from the point of view of science, is I haven't seen anything that would indicate this is a technique to extract information where you have false positives, you have false negatives. How much did the whole process cost? Who did it? What's going on? Was this a good idea or a bad idea? And it sounds like a lot of this happened in the sort of the intensity, the post-traumatic intensity of 9/11.
Yes. Although the Director of Central Intelligence has just in the last few days gone on record saying, I'm not going to sit here and tell you what we got, but I can tell you we've got 30 pages of material that subsequent events proved to be absolutely valid, that we got from torturing.
But did you get
enhanced interrogation?
Did you get 10,000 other pages another way, and could you have expended a similar amount of resources with all the moral damage in doing something else? And can you, for instance, maybe you should try and I don't know. Well, you want a nice soft bed tonight, whatever. I mean, if anything is on the table, and you have to get the information very quickly and acutely. I mean, what other methodologies exist there?
Yes.
What other methodologies exist? I mean,
there
are all kinds of ways to do things.
Yes.
And I'm concerned, and I accept the argument that there are circumstances where this information, obtaining the information, is of vital world importance.
Yes.
And
the bomb is going off in 6 hours.
That could trump a lot of the constitutional restraints or moral restraints the country has. There can be those circumstances, but I would wonder if the restraining process that the government has is adequate for such a task.
Yes.
Do we have people watching it, and the results that one thing that just strikes me is the statement about what the results were, what the efforts were, is very, very incomplete.
Yes.
Maybe we're not allowed to see it. But whatever's been said is so incomplete. It's impressive.
Well, 2 levels here. Number one, they always fall back on, trust me, we got good information, but if I told you, I'd have to kill you.
Yes.
And that's always a scary thing to say, because these people are in the business
Yes.
of being devious. So why not turn that on the American public that funded them? But secondly, and this is the whole reason for a Bill of Rights to begin with, that you're dealing with force majeure. That if executive officials want to do something to you, they are going to do it, and there is nothing you can do to stop it. There are more of them,
Yes.
and they've got bigger and better weapons.
Right.
All you can do is try to preserve your rights and attack in court how you were treated. Now, can that court put your front teeth back in, for instance?
Mm-hmm.
Probably not. Money damages, being released because of a violation of criminal procedure. That's all you can. That's all you can hope for, and that's not a lot if you're being threatened with waterboarding or some other activity that has on occasion produced death.
Well, now there are a lot of complexities out here. The Geneva Convention supposedly protects people in a war. If
you're a signatory to it, yes.
And my understanding is there are a number of parts of the treaty that we might have been signatories to, but others not.
Yes.
Is that a fair?
Yes, there are some limitations. There are some limitations we have never signed on to. So
but some yes. Yeah. Now I'm no expert on the subject. Yes. My understanding is that for instance, Poland is a signatory of what happened, and so if torture occurred on Polish soil in violation of the Geneva Convention, then the World Court would have the ability to prosecute people in Poland for having done this. And in fact, the World Court is out there, located in The Hague. They're bringing people in, particularly from sub-Saharan Africa. They've killed millions of people. They're trying, I think, in Bosnia. They're bringing people in, and they're saying, well, you've tortured people, you've done this, you've done that. I think they may have had some Cambodians that have appeared. But the idea is that there's some kind of standard of morality, and presumably, if in fact torture occurred on these countries that were signatories, then those people involved could be prosecuted, and maybe people in the State Department that might have said this is okay to do this, or in the CIA located here. So you could have a situation where if things went along far enough, that people that were enmeshed in this, which I think it allegedly stopped some years ago, but they couldn't leave the country if they chanced into, if they went to the Netherlands. I mean, presumably they could be arrested because there'd be a warrant out against them. Any comments on that?
Yes. Well, the first defense against that, if I'm an interrogator, is to prevent the host country from even finding out what has happened.
Yes.
Once again, then you've got the act of state doctrine. Is this a sanctioned state activity that might, it might prevent? It's almost like a license to kill, which most states are not going to admit to actually granting a license to kill.
Right.
So you've got a lot of big jurisdictional issues there. So unfortunately, I guess what we're coming down to is it's a scary world. We like the idea, the Wilsonian idea of a world that is safe for democracy and a rule of law. But the fact is that the world has never operated entirely like that. It still doesn't. And in the age of the modern totalitarian state, the modern rogue state, the modern rogue movement, we're entering ugly territory.
Yes, yes. Well, that's a pretty distressing turn of events. Could a person that has been tortured, presumably these people are not American citizens, they were tortured by the U.S. government, they're off whatever, do they have any recourse in American courts? And to say that, I mean, I guess I'm getting also into Guantanamo.
Yes,
presumably everybody's been tortured. Some people have been released. And I think the U.S. would claim, well, these are prisoners of war, and it's a different situation, but maybe that violates the Geneva. If they're saying we're keeping you there because you're a prisoner of war, you're engaged in a war, doesn't that de facto say that this is a war, thus the Geneva Convention applies?
Yes, although who are these people fighting for? The Taliban, which once again is not a Geneva Convention signatory. The court has discussed that some in the Hamdan and the Hamdi case, which required some degree of due process. But once again, the matter of getting yourself before court. And another big question is, let's say I have planted a nuke in New York, and I'm beaten within an inch of my life to spill how to disarm it. And I sue the federal government, even assuming I can get around tort claims or whatever. am I going to be sympathetic to a jury?
All right.
So,
And on that note, Bucky, I think our time has expired, and we'll talk some more on this
Indeed.
issue.
Thank you,
for
sir.
coming. Thank you.
This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.